Minutes past 11. Of course, it's time for What Matters, an interview feature of the day where we discuss issues that concern you. And we are also currently live on Facebook and TikTok at TRAXXfm OFFICIAL, where you can also visualize what's happening in the studios as well and see who do we have in this on the hot seat today. And in the studio, we have Associate Professor Dr. Calvin Cheong, Vice Dean of Sunway Business School. And today we're talking about when giants tax Malaysia and the U.S. reciprocal tariffs. So there you go. Good morning, Professor. How are you today?
Good morning. Great.
Thank you so much for taking your time off your busy schedule to come in the studio. Let's get down to it then. So when it comes to reciprocal tariffs, right, especially in the U.S., what actually is the reciprocal tariffs and what actually prompted its reintroduction in 2025?
Yep, this is a good starting question, I think. Reciprocal tariffs, like its name says, it's really an eye for an eye. You know, you tariff me, I tariff you, that sort of thing. It's really, that's what it is. And why did it get reintroduced? You know, it was done in the first Trump administration, 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, and then now they're reintroducing it again. It's really, to me and to many other commentators as well, it's really isn't about trade. It's more towards Trump turning tariffs into tools of foreign policy leverage. And as you can see, the early reactions and responses from many countries when Trump pulled out that big, cardboard, and then started pointing out to different countries, the immediate response was they would want to negotiate. And it does seem like, it was a sort of like a play, on how to get other countries whom have been exporting to the US to come to the table and then renegotiate their trade deals. So, for Malaysia, for example, we've been exporting quite a lot to the US, measuring somewhere around 20 odd billion last year, and always so far on average at a tariff rate of about 2 to 3%.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
Now
nothing compared to what we have now.
So when Trump reveals that, we're going to hit Malaysia with 24%, and that's where the knee-jerk response comes. So that is basically, many commentators, including myself, we believe that it's really you put it simply, it's sort of like a scare tactic, to bring or rather force people to come to the table to discuss these things. So reciprocal really it's supposed to cut both ways, because the accusation is that countries like Malaysia and all the other countries that were named, have also been imposing tariffs on American products and services. So that's why the US they claim they are hitting back.
So do you agree with other economists as well and businesses when they comment about this? Do you concur with the same with what they feel about the tariffs?
Well, it depends on what they have said. Well, generally, I think the majority consensus seems to be that it's not good. It's not going to do anyone any good.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it's for the Americans, even though the Trump administration claims that imposing tariffs would only serve to bring back the industries to America. But many people, including myself, we don't think that's going to be the case. At least not for the short term. In the longer term, who knows? But again, looking at the sort of industries that he tries, to encourage to return back to the America, right? It's highly unlikely that it would happen, even over the next 5 years.
Now, how do these tariffs actually affect Malaysia specifically, and which of our industries are most exposed to this?
I think the hardest hit, so far based on early reports, is the hardest hit will be our high volume, low margin exporters. These are the ones that are really, what our nation depends upon for job creation in manufacturing industries, especially in the industries of electrical and electronics, the E&E, which the industry calls it. Because the E&E industry is really one of our largest exporters to the US, and then these were the ones who immediately felt the impact of the tariff announcement. Now, I think the next one would probably be the medical devices industry as well, another major exporting industry to the US from Malaysia. We could see the palm oil and palm oil derivative products, the rubber glove industry to be affected as well, because I think many of us remember, especially during the height of the COVID pandemic, these few industries were specifically targeted by the then Biden administration, for accusations of abuse, of labor rights and so on. So I think these industries are already on they are sort of the American government's radar, on industries that may feel the brunt of these trade restrictions. So I think it's something that we want to look out for, moving forward. And I think the Malaysian government definitely needs to look further into it. The industry players, from these industries would really need to think further, beyond the US.
And I just saw recently about the solar tariff, solar panels and all that. What do you think about that?
I think I haven't had the chance to really go deep into the reports that have come out. Okay, but looking at some of the reports that have been, the statements seem to say that these tariffs were actually started during the Biden administration. And I think really the idea, is to again bring back these industries to the US. Rather, because right now we see that many of the solar panel producers, or as a derivative of that, the electric vehicle industry as well is centered around Asia, especially China. And China, again, even during the Biden administration, being one of the American government's main targets, for trade reforms and deals. I think this is something that it's going to last for a much longer term. Nothing. I don't seem to see anything concrete yet. Any concrete statements regarding the solar panel industry.
Yep. Or any other. Industries
correct,
as well.
Yep.
So what do you think about these tariffs? Could shifts in Malaysia's trade priorities or redirect our export focus toward other regions like ASEAN, China, or the Middle East? Do you think these tariffs could actually shift Malaysia's trade priorities?
If it hasn't already, I think it should. Because again, many business leaders, that I've spoken to as well, they all agree that over-reliance on a single industry, especially the US, is not good for business. And it makes perfect business sense to diversify your customer base, to diversify your supplier base as well, right? So ASEAN, I think, is a region that many people have commented saying that that's going to be the next big thing, for Malaysia's trade industries. So that's something that I would say the Malaysian government should really look further into, given that Malaysia has taken on the role of the chair of ASEAN starting this year. So I think that we are really in a good position to do something much bigger, to really create a trade network in ASEAN that really integrates the economic capabilities of the different countries in ASEAN as well as outside of ASEAN, and then perhaps finally reduce our concentration on America.
Well, there you go. Hopefully it's a blessing in disguise. We just hope that the next meetings together with other ASEAN regions will do something great together. But anyway, if you'd like to have any questions asked, well, you can do so on our TikTok account or even our Facebook Live. We are currently live on those platforms at TRAXXfm, OFFICIAL. Coming up, we're going to talk more about tariffs and how ASEAN plays its role as well. And we're talking to Associate Professor Dr. Calvin Cheong, Vice Dean of Sunway Business School, talking about when giants tax Malaysia and the US reciprocal tariffs. So stick around right here on Traxx for further details on that. Yeah, Otto here, coming to you live from Angkasa Puri, Kuala Lumpur, with the topic of the day: when giants tax Malaysia and the U.S. reciprocal tariffs. Today we have in the studio Associate Professor Dr. Calvin Cheung, Vice Dean from Sunway Business School. Once again, thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Most welcome.
Now, a very hot topic today when it comes to tariffs, and a lot of people are asking about certain things when it comes to strategy, and one of them is Najib Nawi on our TikTok account asking this question: when it comes to trade wars, is it just a way to sway the world's view? What do you think? Is it just a strategy, or is it something else?
I mean, if you look at the response again, like what we said earlier, it's really a way to bring all these other nations to the table, because you see in the run-up to the presidential election when Trump won, his campaign manifesto was to really bring the jobs back, bring the industries back. So what he's really doing now is his claim, that all these other countries have been taking advantage of the US. So now he wants to bring all these industries back to the US, and he's targeted specifically all these countries who have, exported a lot, of goods and services to the US, to now bring them to the table and renegotiate trade deals. So swaying global political opinion, I'm not too sure about that, but definitely it's about renegotiation.
Yes. Well, there you go. Hopefully that answers your question, Najib. Very controversial over there, but thank you. All right. Also, how have similar tariffs actually played out in history, all right, for other middle-income nations? Are there any relevant lessons for Malaysia that can draw from?
I think we can look back to the first Trump administration, where again he made the same, imposition of tariffs on various countries, particularly in the South America. Okay? And South America over there, we saw Brazil particularly, was one of the major victims, let's call it that, of these retaliatory tariffs. But as a outcome of that, we saw over the last 5-6 years, the South American nations have actually banded together, more closely to create sort of like a South-South trade links between one another and with the rest of the world. So that I would say is something that, again, Malaysia and our ASEAN region as well as the Asia Pacific could actually learn from it. I mean, if you look much closer to home, Vietnam is a good example of really climbing up the value chain and the supply chain, especially after 2008, and you see now Vietnam being one of the major industrial powerhouses, rivaling, in some industries' cases, rivaling that of China as well. So I think Malaysia we could really learn, a lot from all these examples. If we really could just pivot and adjust, the way we rewire our economies, the priorities that we place on our domestic production lines, and generally our entire supply chain.
That's it. Now, is there any legal or diplomatic path for Malaysia to challenge these tariffs, or through ASEAN, of course, or WTO, or bilateral discussions?
Well, I think legal paths exist, but I believe, and I think many others as well, believe that the real solutions lie in diplomacy and trade realignment, especially smart trade realignment. I mean, we see that, the immediate response from Malaysia after the announcement of the tariff was to, MITI, I think, sent a delegation to the US to discuss this. Now, what comes out of it, we still don't know, but we know that right now, Trump has basically put on hold the 24% tariff. Right now, everyone's at a flat rate of 10%, over the next 90 days. Right? And how that would change after the 90 days, we still don't know. But was this really the outcome of the trade negotiation, or was this the outcome of the US stock market and bond markets tanking after the announcement of the tariffs? No one knows, right? Yeah. So, I would say that, yes, there could be, a legal pathways, perhaps through the WTO, right? But I would believe, and I would actually encourage, I would prefer to see, a more diplomatic way of doing it.
Don't we all? Yeah. It's better to discuss with each others, talk about things that we can actually provide and what you can provide. So it's a win-win situation.
That's the fundamental principle of trade anyway. It is mutual benefit.
There we go. Now, what would be a smart strategy, in your opinion, for local companies facing these tariffs? Can technology or probably value-added manufacturing be a buffer?
Well, I think when trade barriers and restrictions start to come up, really the first victims are always the low tech, low margin firms, right? That really get trapped in between. So what I would say and encourage these industries to really look at is to re-innovate. Again, first by looking elsewhere besides the US. Looking at the type of technology that we have. Yes, it's pretty good, but I'm sure we can definitely do much better. In fact, our government has already put in place many different incentives, like our Penjana, and the industry forward, incentives, to actually push the way forward for tech entrepreneurship, digitalization of small, medium industries. So I would think that we really should take advantage of this new direction rather than to just continue to look in the more traditional and conservative way of doing business. And in fact, again, I'm a strong advocate, I will say it again, expanding to other markets, reducing reliance on just one country.
Well, there you have it. We're talking to Associate Professor Dr. Calvin Cheong, Vice Dean of Sunway Business School, talking about Giants Tax, Malaysia, and the U.S. reciprocal tariffs over here. And once again, we are currently live on Facebook as well as on TikTok. So should you have any questions for our good guests here in the studio, just leave a comment over there, like it, and also share it as well. Just a quick hello to those online. We have Christina Chin says, hello, good morning, Otto, Associate Professor Dr. Calvin Cheong. Abdul Malik Rahman says, a very hot subject now. While Najib Nawi also has a question over there, but I'll leave that for later. But before we go for a short break, one last question over here. Do you see this situation accelerating Malaysia's pivot to high-tech, green, or digital exports to reduce our dependency on traditional goods?
I really do hope so. That's a short and simple question. I really do hope so because again, we see many industries. We are capable. I'm very confident in our country, our domestic economy to do better, right? And I would really hope and encourage any of the listeners out there who are in these industries to really innovate, right? Because if you see our 12 Malaysia plan, during the midterm review, we started to accelerate green manufacturing, EV ecosystem developments, AI-focused innovations, and then we are now also engaging with foreign investments on our data centers and all that. So opportunities are there, right? But we really need to take advantage of these opportunities. So again, the government also in the previous budget allocated some 1.2 billion, to tech and digital startups, right? So I think we should really look into these areas rather than focus on the traditional conservative industries. I mean, even if they are conservative or traditional industries, I'm pretty sure that there are ways to digitalize this, to expand your markets, not only in your local, districts or areas, but really to look outwards, to other countries, other markets as well. So if we aren't already doing it, we really should.
Well, there you have it. We have Associate Professor Dr. Calvin Cheong, Vice Dean of Sunway Business School, talking about tariffs. So once again, if you have any questions, leave a comment in the comment section over there on our TikTok or even Facebook, and then we'll get right to it. But first up, we're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk more about how prepared are we in the near future. So stick around right here on Traxx. Sir Dr. Calvin Cheong, Vice Dean of Sunway Business School, about tariffs. Now, without further ado, how should Malaysia prepare for a potentially more protectionist global trade environment, especially if these tariffs, let's say, become permanent? Just hypothetically. I think this also relates to one of the questions posted on X, on our TikTok account. So yeah, take a listen to this.
Well, I think, assuming we continue to have these trade protectionist policies in place, really, like I've said many times, and I'm still a firm believer of it, we need to diversify our markets, diversify our customer bases, diversify our supplier bases as well. Look at, for Malaysia's case, really look at the ASEAN region. There's so much potential over there, especially with industrial powerhouses like Thailand and Vietnam, Indonesia, one of our closest neighbors. And of course, when it comes to professional and financial services, let's look at Singapore. Let's integrate more closely with them. Let's liberalize our business regulations, liberalize our mobility and immigration policies within the ASEAN region to really encourage a more free flow of businesses, more free flow of capital between the ASEAN nations. I think that's one way, because we could really use the European Union as a good example here, where, freedom of mobility between the European countries, it's really has, made the European Union a much closer, a close-knit community, I would say, a global community. So I think we can do that for ASEAN as well, and that would really help us moving forward into the future, assuming these protectionist policies by the major superpowers continue to be there.
Now, you mentioned off air about SMEs being 90%, in the industry. What's your message towards them?
Well, I think it's all about pivoting. Yes, I think many Malaysians, many of us, in fact myself as well, we all grew up with the belief that the government will always help us out in one way or another, right? Providing some sort of relief, some form of subsidy. Well, yes, that's really what the government's role is, to really protect its people. But can it be done in the very short term? That's highly unlikely. So we have to be realistic. So to the SME owners, the business owners, really, if you have the capacity to expand, to diversify, really do expand and diversify, because we really need to start pivoting. We need to pivot, what we are doing, look at, different ways to innovate what we are currently producing, and really, to look outside, our usual markets, what we are really currently doing.
So look out to your comfort zone and see the potential out there. Just for
Exactly.
example, like China already opened its doors to Malaysia, visa free for until the end of the
Correct.
year. You can use that opportunity to go out and see other possibilities that you can venture into. So with that, of course, Professor, what's your message to Malaysian entrepreneurs or workers feeling anxious, about the global shifts currently?
Well, I think at this point in time, I really don't see a need, to be overly anxious. Like all business owners, we need to be prepared. That's true. Okay, we always need to plan ahead of time. But to really overreact, like we saw in the initial days when the tariffs were announced, I think that was really an overreaction. Saying that your iPhones would jump up to 15,000, 16,000 per phone. Now, I highly doubt that would happen, right? So let's not overreact, but at the same time, it makes pure business sense to really start planning for the future and start looking elsewhere as well.
Well, there we go. Thank you so much. We're talking to Associate Professor Dr. Calvin Cheong, Vice Dean of Sunway Business School, about tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, US and also Malaysia. Thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Most welcome. Thank you.
And thank you very much to those who are online on our TikTok account and Facebook. Thank you for joining the live and asking those questions. And of course, stick around. We have the news at the top of the hour, and then we'll be right back with more stories. So stick around.